Mr. President, we can call to order.
Very good. I'm going to raise my silver hammer and we'll call the November 18th meeting of the Brainerd Planning Commission to order. Mr. Jansky, roll call, please.
Absolutely, Mr. President. Foley. Woodward.
Here.
Calroos.
Here.
Yeager.
Yes.
Lambert.
Yes.
Duval.
Present.
And Gorham.
Here. All right, very good. We're up to item number 3, looking for a approval and or change of tonight's agenda.
Mr. President, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
If I can ask that the commission remove approval of the minutes for October 21st due to just having short of staffing with some staff members being out for either because of COVID, either exposed or having it over the last few weeks. We've been short staffed and we just haven't been able to get those minutes completely formalized. So I would just ask that we would remove those minutes and we'll have those on the agenda for the next meeting.
All right, we're skipping item 4. Can I have a motion on approval of item 3 of tonight's agenda with the change?
So moved,
Yeager.
Second, Duval.
Very good. Roll call, Mr. Chansky.
Calroos.
Yes.
Woodward.
Aye.
Yeager.
Yes.
Lambert.
Yes.
Duval.
Aye.
And Gorham.
Yes. Very good. We're moving up to item number 5, the new business for tonight. We are finishing I think about a 2-year process now working with District 181. We are up to a conditional use permit for the property at 400 Quint Street. And I'm going to let Mr. Chansky kind of introduce the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Scott Whittemore, who's with ICS, has submitted a request on behalf of Independent School District 181 for a conditional use permit for Lincoln Education Level 4 Special Education Facility at 400 Quint Street, otherwise known more commonly. This is the South Campus of the Brainerd High School. As listed in their application, this project will entail demolishing approximately 41,000 square feet of the existing building. This is essentially the east wing of the building, and remodeling the remaining 71,900 square feet to be utilized by the Lincoln Education Center, STARS, and Paul Bunyan Transition Plus programs. The project will utilize the existing building at 400 Quinn Street, which is currently being utilized for the Brainerd High School South Campus. Per section 515-54-F5, paragraph F, public schools are permitted as a conditional use within R1 districts, and 400 Quint Street is within an R1 district. There are a couple conditions. The site accesses a major collector. The site is landscaped and according to section 20 of this of the zoning code. Off-street parking is provided according to section 22 of the zoning code. Off-street loading and entrances are provided as regulated by section 23. And emergency vehicle access is provided to and within the site. Having conducted my review, Mr. Chair, I believe it does meet all these requirements. Being at the location of Quince and South Fifth, it is on a major roadways, collectors. They have submitted a landscaping plan, which we can review a little later when the representatives from ISD 181 go through their project with you. When it comes to off-street parking, K-12 schools are exempt from minimum off-street parking requirements. They do have submitted a parking plan that in there, and it does seem to conform with the rest of section 22. Off-street loading, looking at their requirements, and they all talk about their off-street loading, what their plan is where. They've gone through staff with that. All aspects of their plan also seem to conform with section 515-23. And as regarding emergency vehicle access, their plan was gone over thoroughly by both the police chief and the fire chief, and they gave their approvals. One thing I did want to point out is on June 3rd of 2019, this is when the city council approved the conditional use permit for the main campus of the Brainerd High School. The council, in addition to approving that CUP, they also adopted a motion that reads, an understanding between ISD 181 and the city that the lights for the south and lower parking lots for the high school are approved at 23 feet moving forward. I did confer with the city attorney just to make sure, because they made that motion in June, and then later on in the year, we had the planning commission adopted revised the lighting ordinance. And I just wanted to confer with him, and he said that this motion by the city council would still stand, nevertheless, even though the lighting ordinance has since changed. There are photometric plans. It's on the last 2 pages of the applicant's submitted documents which you received. Finally, the city engineer did have a few comments regarding the stormwater and the ESC plan. He said he talked about analysis shows that there may be a decrease in stormwater runoff from the site, which in turn will help the city stormwater long term. So we should see less stormwater based off of their plan. He did talk about that there is MPDES permit that they'll have to get, but he'll be working with the city engineer on that as well. For the purposes of the CUP, he does state that the stormwater and ESC plan is approved, and that we should just be getting copies of some of these permits. Other than that, Mr. Chair, that's all I have in my findings of fact so far for this CUP.
All right. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Chansky before we open a public hearing? Done once and twice. All right, let's open a public hearing. I can't quite see a clock, but it's about 6:11. So we're gonna open a public hearing at 6:11. Do we have a representative of the school district with us that would like to introduce the plan?
Well, Commissioner Gorham, Scott Whittemore, I submitted the application on behalf of ISD 181. We also have Reed TC, Director of Building and Grounds, as well as Tim Rammerth, who is the civil engineer for this project on this call this evening. Guess I'm a little unfamiliar with the process here for going through this. Mr. Chansky, do you want to just scroll through, basically start at page 1 and roll through it?
You want me to go all the way? You want these information as well, or just want to get me to some site plans?
Probably just to the site plans.
Okay, we'll scroll down here and we'll start. How's this got?
Perfect.
Okay.
That'll work.
I'm just going to jump in real quick and say we're probably less interested in the shape of curbs and some of the really specifics. I think if we start with kind of the overview, and then if we have specific questions, we can narrow in. So with that guidance, please proceed.
Yeah, absolutely. Right here's the overall plan. Top left shows the site as it is currently. Top right, just kind of a satellite image of that as well. If we go to the next plan page. This indicates the amount of the demolition. As Mr. Chansky had said earlier, we're demolishing approximately 41,000 square feet of the eastern side of the building and remodeling the remaining 71,000 square feet of the western part, and that will then make up the STARS, Paul Bunyan Transition Plus, and the Lincoln Level 4 education program. Next page, you can see on the western side of the plan sheet, we have reduced the size of the parking lot that we call parking lot 1 and increased the amount of green space for this program where the existing Transition Plus house is currently. That building will be demolished and turn into green space, and we'll add in a level 4 playground facility on that side. If you're looking at Plan North, there's really not much changes to that. Most of that work was incorporated into the Brainerd High School North Campus plan. moving east from there, you'll see the bus drop off, which will serve the main entrance of the building, which is kind of the easternmost portion of the site there. And right where Mr. Chansky's hand is that bus drop off lane. We got 114 parking spaces and 5 ADA spaces, which will primarily serve South Campus as well as North Campus during events, athletic activities, things of that nature. If you could go to the next plan sheet. Unless somebody's got questions, I'll move through this kind of quick.
I say go ahead. I'll go ahead and then we'll open up the questions. So just go ahead.
Don, can we get the font a little bit bigger at all, David? And still see everything?
I think we're going to lose part of the big picture,
Yeah,
but sure.
No, that's okay. Just, I don't want you to lose any of that. That's okay. You can go back to the regular one if you'd like, because we'll lose too much. I like to keep it on page, but no, that's okay. You can go back.
Yep, really the only thing you're seeing, which is a change, is the addition of the stormwater collection basin on the east side of the parking lot there, where Ms. Chansky's hand is. One thing to notice, on the north side of the building, there is a trellis system and kind of an expanded green space off of the north of the building that you'll see a little bit later as we get into some of those architectural views. Next page, we're looking at our erosion control plan. So really no change there, just annotating the additional green space. Another next page, utility plan. We won't be rerouting some of the utilities because they are served by the eastern part of the building. And that's just indicated on this plan print. Next page is our paving plan, which shows on the west or plan left side of the building, that fire lane, fire access lane, essentially on both sides of the building, and then our darker gray area for the bus drop off on the east side of school. Go to the next plan page, and we've got our landscaping for kind of that expanded green space on the north side of the school. Next plan page is an overview of the facility as it will look once completed. You can see the north arrow is the entrance for the Paul Bunyan's Transition Plus and the STARS program. The easterly arrow is the new main entrance of the building, and the southerly red arrow will be the Lincoln Education Center entrance. On the next plan page, so where that east red arrow is your top cut section. That'll show the new main entrance for the South Campus building. It was previously located on the north side of the building. We're moving it to the east side, and that's consistent with the bus drop off. The existing building, to note, is precast, structural precast, so we're not making any changes to the exterior of the building with the exception of where we're adding these entrances. We have implemented the Warrior Blue, for lack of a better term, color into these metal wall panels, as well as a wood grained effect, which you'll see north of that main entrance, and it kind of wraps around the building to the north side. And the next image is a 3D rendering. If you keep going, Mr. Chansky, right there. There is what we're looking at in 3D effect. You can see the new plantings in front of our new trellis design off the north side of the building, flagpole, plantings around the northeast corner of the building, and then I guess just the aesthetic of the exterior finishes, how they come together there. We move on to the next page. You'll see the photometric lighting layout, parking lot lighting, as indicated by the parking plans. And the next page is your photometric diagram showing that we're meeting the cutoffs. at the property line. And then the final page is the nighttime illumination diagram. Did I miss anything, Mr. Rammerth?
Well, no, probably the only thing that I would add, Scott, and planning commission members, is on the south side of the building, the southeast side, the school district will retain that storage area for their vehicles. So if we go to the site plan, you'll notice that we've got some opaque fencing on the north end of that. And then we will retain an 8-foot high chain link fence around that area for the vehicles in that area. Yeah, and then one thing you'll note also is on the south end of that parking area where it says 27 parking spaces, the school needs to retain an auxiliary form of fuel, which there will be a propane tank on that concrete pad.
Very good. Are we ready to open up for some questions?
Absolutely.
I'm going to start with a quick question. I'm a walker, love to walk. There is a set of stairs behind the existing south campus that that drops down the hillside to the lower parking lot. That's still going to be there, I presume?
That's not planned to be demolished.
Excellent. Good.
But there is maybe talk about gating that off just because with the level of care that we need for the folks that will be using the facility here is that we will have a fence around that westerly side. So it's not like you'll be able to come up the stairs and traverse the school property. So I think it's kind of still under discussion what's ultimately going to happen with those stairs.
Well, as somebody who loves to walk in this town, that set of stairs is a neat little cutoff, and I would be really disappointed, frankly, if the public loses access. I understand during school hours the public access is kind of iffy, but on a Sunday afternoon, if you want to cut through that area, I think it would be a real shame to lose that access. But that's just my 2 cents worth. I don't think that's any decision for tonight. But
Mr. Chair.
yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. I just have a couple quick questions. David, maybe you can help out with a little bit of this. I'm a little fuzzy on exactly how our ordinance reads with the parking lot screening of all exposed parking lots that have 10 or more spaces are supposed to be screened with landscaping, not less than 3 feet, not more than 4 feet in height, and that needs to maintain 50% opacity year round. Now, I understand that you do not require screening from yourself, as in within the same property, but would screening not be required to the south and to the east side of these parking lots as they are facing or directly adjacent to R1 zones? And a quick follow-up, just so I can get off air here real quick, is also regarding the lot on the lower eastern side that has 27 parking spaces. I think that anything that has more than 20 spaces is required to have a landscape bed at the termination or at one end. And I may be not reading that correctly and maybe not understanding, but my question is directed towards the screening and making sure that we're meeting what the ordinance currently asks of us on the screening side for this parking lot. Thank you.
Yes, I can answer that, Commissioner Yeager. So when I was looking at this plan, when it came to the screening requirement, and I have that part up we were talking about, one of the things I read, again, our landscape plan, just a little bit, our landscape ordinance, it's clunky, in my opinion. And I will say it's been interesting when working with this landscape plan in the 2 years I've been with the city. Because one thing I think I have seen is situations where for some reason it wasn't followed, and I don't know what the history all with that is. But one thing I'm reading to your point, we're talking about section 515-20-9A talks about the all exposed parking areas of 10 or more required in a front and side street yard shall be screened. One of the situations with this one, and I will admit, I did kind of sit there and go back and forth with going, okay, what are we requiring here? That if you look at their site plan, the parking lots are obviously here. Is you have this drive in between the parking lot, and does the drive, because then it does separate the parking lot from the street, therefore mitigate the requirement for landscaping. One thing I looked at is the current scenario. When you look at, and actually, I think I will try to slide this over so you can see. This is just a Google Maps image. This was taken, I believe, this is 2018. So as you go down on College Drive, the topography itself automatically starts to do some screening. So that was the other thing addressing, is what is the purpose of the screening. And as you go down, you'll see you start to, and this is a Google car, and the camera is about 10 feet off the ground. As you go down, this area of the building is going to be demolished. Yes, there'll be cars up here. You'll see the cars are already way up there. And so that was, I will admit, Commissioner Yeager, this is one area where I looked at it and I kind of was looking, okay, what is the intention of the code in this situation, and whether or not it needed landscaping. I don't think it would be outside of the realm of the Planning Commission to decide that there needs to be landscaping there. And I would ultimately kind of leave that decision up to you, whether or not you truly believe that the intent of the ordinance is to have that landscaping there or not.
Well, then I'll add to that, David, too. Maybe what doesn't show up real well on the site plan is on the far easterly side where we have those 5 parking stalls, and then there's that drive aisle. East of that drive aisle is a green space. You'll see what happens there is College Drive kind of bends back to the east, and it creates a green space about where our logos are. Yeah, about in that area.
And I can actually, let's pull up, I'll swing this over. This is the GIS overview. These images were taken last fall. So this is the current situation. So this is what Mr. Raymerth was talking about. There's a whole green space all up in here as well.
Yep.
So this is where I will defer to the Planning Commission regarding landscaping requirements in this area.
Very good. Mr. Yeager, did we answer your questions?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I just want to add that this is the one area to this plan that I have kind of zoned in on and feel pretty sensitive to. It's my opinion that with the parking lot being elevated from the road as well as the walking path, that the screening or the lack of screening is actually exacerbated. I think, in my opinion, it's actually worse because you're looking at the parking lot in an elevated position versus if the road were higher, you'd be effectively looking over the tops of those cars. So I'm going to be of the opinion and of the position that the screening needs to be met in between College Drive and this parking lot on that entire easterly side. I can appreciate the green space, but it's just grass. So my feeling is when you're driving either up or down College Drive, you are going to see a very large parking space there, very large parking lot there with no screening. So it's my opinion when looking at this that I would like to see the screening along that whole side there. We've worked really hard to make College Drive, as beautiful as can be from top to bottom, and I'd prefer to not look right into that parking lot. So that's where I'm at, guys. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Other questions? Mr. Duvall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Picking up on the vegetation in that parking lot area, could you tell me what the finish is for these various islands in that parking lot that's not the infiltration basin? Are those going to be just rock, or do you have the intention of having grass or plantings in there? Or are those all infiltration. I don't know.
No, those are not infiltration. Can you scroll down to our erosion control plan, David? So I think we just have them shown as grass currently, but I think, you know, we could visit with Reed on that to see what, if there'd be a preference of making that mulch or rock or grass.
Or shrubs or things that might add to the screening that Commissioner Yeager was speaking to. Certainly that one in the top right of this image could lend itself in a screening fashion if it were used as a planting area. Thank you, Tim. Could you expound on what the vegetation plan would be for the infiltration basin? What's that going to look like? So it's going to take water, so it's got to be pretty resilient, and then it's going to dry out, and then it's going to get wet. What's going there?
Yeah, we'll have to get some soil borings there to kind of determine what the seasonal high water table is, but the intent currently would be is that this would be dry, and so that it would temporarily have water impounded, and it would just be some sort of a natural grass vegetation.
So that's you know, hats off to you to really putting that much water in the ground. I think it's a great idea. You know, one of the thoughts that you'll need to have is, you know, because it's going to be sort of that stress environment with water and inundation, it's probably going to be prone to invasive species or just weeds, beggar ticks and things like that may require you to be a little bit more vigilant on. So part of that may be to be thoughtful about what goes in there on the front end that can tolerate sort of that wet, dry cycling. And you can probably find resources, or you already have experience on what might be appropriate to put in that kind of a setting.
Right, we can work with our landscape architect on that to see maybe a native vegetation might be appropriate in that location.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions from the commission? Any commissioners who haven't spoken would like to step in? Not hearing any. Mr. Duvall.
Mr. Chair, thank you. If I could speak to the lighting, I think that was drawing E0002. Just had some questions about light color. Your parking lot lights and those that illuminate the playground area all seem to be 3000 Kelvin, sort of a warm color. I noticed that the ARC2 LEDs that go on the buildings and the radian post tops that go sort of in that pergola area are proposed at 4000 Kelvin, a much bluer light. If I'm interpreting your order codes correctly here. So I'm just wondering what the rationale is for that in your Garfield project and Lowell project. Those kinds of lightings on the building were 3000 Kelvin. I recall, Tim, that in our discussions about lighting at the high school, I think that you and or the district verbally agreed to bring the color of those to 3000. So I was, if there's a rationale for 4000 here, or whether that's something you can amend the plan to accommodate a 3000 Kelvin luminary.
I'll probably have to defer to you on that one, Scott. Have you had conversations with Ken on that?
I did, although I didn't specifically ask why there's 4000 on the outside of the building. That's definitely something that we can take a look at. I don't think that's a major effect. It's not going to change the light description, so that would be change back down. Unless Reed, you're still on. I don't know if you've got any preference from the 3000 to the 4000 Kelvin lights there, but I don't know if it works better for security system or not, one way or the other, but that'd be my only consideration with making that change.
Hear me okay?
Now we can hear you, Reed.
Okay, sorry about that. I was talking and it wasn't coming through my headset. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, yeah, technical difficulties here in our virtual world. I think that we definitely will can entertain that conversation with our electrical engineering firm there, Commissioner Duval. You know, from a consistency standpoint, I would like to see the North and South Campus look and feel like it is one space. We are a school district, not a district of schools. So I don't want to see that variation across the two sites. And so we will double check that and make sure that we are maintaining that consistency throughout that entire high school site. I don't have a strong preference either way. I'm not a huge fan of the 5500K, the real bright white lighting. I obviously understand the intent for softening the look with the softer lighting temperature there. So we'll definitely bring that back and have a review of that to ensure we're not varying from our previous submittals.
And then I think we just have to double check to make sure that, it doesn't have an effect on our lighting and spacing and things like that. Yep.
Very good. Mr. Duval, does that answer your questions?
One other question. I noticed in the parking lot there, I think I'm reading your drawing correctly. There's a it looks like a parking light pole in the lined area. It's not in an island. Does that have an island around it, or is that just going to have a light base and a pole coming out of that?
It'd be a light base and a pole, 3 foot, 3 foot bollard, and then the 20-foot light post on top of it.
Okay. Would that be difficult to plow around or represent a hazard for cars parking in the parking lot?
I don't think it'd be any different than what we have going on at North Campus. We've got lights that are not within islands there as well.
Yeah, it's common to have them out in the open in parking lots. We just have to have a concrete base so that if there are incidents, it's protected. So
resilient. Thank you.
Yeah,
that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any other commissioners? Would any other commissioners like to ask a question?
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Mr.
please.
Chair, this is Jan. It's not necessarily a question, but I do like the idea that Mr. Yeager and Mr. Duval had about some screening in those spaces on the parking lot there. I think that would be beneficial, and I think it would improve the appearance roadside. So I just want to say I do concur with that.
Thank you, Jan. I think when we get to the point of to the motion stage, I think we're finding some things that I think there's probably a consensus to include in terms of the conditional use permit on that. Other questions? Other comments?
Mr. Chair, I have a quick question. I guess I'd just like clarity around where specifically you're wanting this screening to be placed.
Let's start with Mr. Yeager. Could you help describe the area that you're concerned about?
Yes, I'll do my best here. I'm not doing the design work here. I'm raising the point of a concern. So I guess if it were me, I personally would like to see the screening on the easterly side of your access road that runs the length parallel to College Drive. If space requirements do not allow, in my opinion, a second best effort would be in the islands in between the access road and the parking lot, but my strong preference would be to try and get it in between College Drive and your the little accessory road that comes skirting alongside the parking lot. Screening that whole easterly side, I believe, would meet the intent of the writing of this ordinance. The ordinance is pretty clear. It's designed to screen parking lots from R1 zones. So that's personally where I would like to see it.
And then just for conversation point, are we then screening the parking lot or are we screening the drive? because that's the thoroughfare where all the utilities are going to be running to serve South Campus. So I've got a little bit of hesitation to putting plantings in green space that have the potential of affecting the operation of the school. Just as a point of notice.
And then also, Mr. Yeager, maybe a point of clarification, if you could. Again, we lose a lot of elevation on College Drive as we go south. Is there any kind of guidance you could give us on if we get below the parking lot at a certain elevation from College that screening wouldn't need to be as prevalent?
I would agree that the elevation adds nuance to the interpretation of this ordinance here. I think obviously as you go down College Drive, it gets better because I shot across from College Drive, but we also need to remember that there are residences that are at the same elevation across College Drive, looking back towards the west towards the parking lot. So in my opinion, the elevation may be a factor with College Drive and the walk that runs parallel to that, but I think you'll find that the elevation is very similar to the residences that are just across College Drive. Now, I understand that when a parking lot is adjacent to or across an alley from residential zone, that it's supposed to be increased to 6 feet. I think I'm probably a little less concerned about the 6 foot screening, but my opinion here is that the 3 foot screening with 50% opacity needs to be met across the entire easterly side of the thoroughfare. Now I can't speak to the impact to the mechanicals, but what I can speak to is that I feel a lot more strongly about the aesthetics of how this feels versus the underground mechanicals. So I'd be open to ideas from the people who are taking this on from the design side to come up with options here. But it's basically what I'm saying is I'd still like to see that 3 foot, 50% opacity met along the entire easterly side.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Lambert, please.
Lambert, this is Lambert.
Mhm.
Right, you got the floor?
You do.
David, could you put that photo up that you showed us on Google? Because isn't what Kevin's talking about, isn't that the retaining wall side? Am I wrong?
Yes.
It is retaining wall side, and to note, based on that topo map that you have pulled up, and it's a pretty steep elevation change from north to south. The furthest northeast side, yeah, there is a considerable distance away a singular house, but then there's also a pretty steep elevation change across the pit that's wooded additionally. The district really, and I don't want to be speaking for somebody else, but the point, they would like this to be a good visual indication as you're coming up that College Drive with this beautiful front facade to the facility. They want it to be warm and welcoming for the people that are going to be utilizing that facility as well. So just something for consideration when we're talking about the screening along that east side.
Yeah, as we converse about this here and take a look at that, if you could pan down just a little bit, David, to get a little closer to Quince. Pan down the other way. Yeah, I would think it would make sense to maybe focus your screening on this green space, because where you have is the residents right here at the intersection of Quince are more at grade, and as you go south, it falls off pretty drastically. So I would think it would make sense to focus maybe the screening in that green space right at the north end there along Quince.
I agree, and I understand where Kevin's coming from, but the screening between the parking lot and that thoroughfare, that road, I think that I would rather see screening there than down on, if I understand Kevin, down lower. I would rather see it up there.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I'm going with this is the idea. I agree with you 100%. We want this to look inviting. And I think that's really the intent of the ordinance, is that we don't want to see a 6-foot tall fence, but we also don't want to see cars. So if I'm reading, and I may be taking some liberties with the intent of the ordinance, but it says that it's not less than 3 feet, but not more than 4 feet tall with 50% opacity. The idea here is to screen the cars from the visual, or, from the roadway, from what you can see looking from R1 zones or looking into that parking lot. And I think as an example, if what was done at the hospital in North Brainerd, that came up specifically, I was a part of that conversation. And it has to do also with lights on plow trucks in odd hours of the night or late hours of the night, plowing these parking lots and that. So I'd like to see it right in that green space right there, shielding this, what is now going to be a much, much larger parking lot. Thank you.
Very good. And Mr. Yeager, just a quick follow-up question. If we addressed that space, would you be okay with what the plan entails closer to the river, farther down the road? Or do we have to really choose between, one or the other, right?
Mr. Chair, well, I guess that is up to all of us as to what the intent of screening is supposed to do. When I read it, it's really intended to conceal parking lots. So I think it's up to us as a group to really talk about where should that start and stop. We've all seen examples in this city where this screening has not been met and the impacts of that. And that's really what I'm trying, why I'm raising this question is if we want a long-term plan to work out, it has to be implemented in the short term. And I guess that's where I'm going with this is I feel this does meet the 10 or more spaces required screening ordinance.
Okay, so you'd be happy with what we're discussing right now of focusing on the green space, correct?
Absolutely. I think the intent is it's supposed to be right next to the parking lot to conceal the parking lot.
Very good.
Yeah, so now, Mr. Chair, if I may, I think point of clarification. So this is kind of a nice visual. You see where the retaining walls start going south on College Drive there? Maybe that would be the southerly end we start and then go north from there with the screening. Would that meet your objectives, Mr. Yeager?
Boy, I sure think that's going the right direction here. I absolutely agree that there's a little bit of nuance in this just because of the severe elevation change, and the elevation is definitely helping us as we get south. So yeah, I think as a point of compromise, at least on my side, it's mostly that lot that's to the north that I'm mostly concerned about, and that gigantic wide open green space just looking into that parking lot is what I'm trying to address here tonight. Thank you.
And I think that would be doable because I think the challenge we'll have is as you hit that retaining wall, our green space becomes very narrow, so it's going to be pretty challenging to deal with that.
All right.
So, Mr. Chair,
Mrs.
Lambert, yeah. Is it possible that we can go down further south on this? Because are we doing anything with the parking lot that's at the other end? Do we?
So what will be happening there, Ms. Lambert, is you see those arborvitae that are sticking up there now?
Yeah.
Those will have to come down. But
Okay.
what you'll see from the road is all you really see is retaining wall.
Mm-hmm.
So we have not proposed any screening on that side currently.
Okay. How about further down? Don't we get the pit parking lot down there? That's not really screened?
That's kind of outside the bounds of this project.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Mm-hmm.
Very good. So at this point, we could either go farther with questioning if people have more questions, or if somebody is brave and would like to propose a motion, we can begin to look at this in terms of a motion.
Mr. Chair, I think we're still in public hearing at this time. Okay. Do we need to close that in order to proceed?
Well, I think you're right. Okay. We do. So I just last chance of questions. Let's put it this way: last chance of questions before we close the hearing. All right, I'm gonna raise the hammer and I'm gonna close the public hearing at 6:40. What I'm looking at 6:42 or 6:48. Very good. Now we'll open the discussion to commission members. Do we have a brave soul that would like to propose a motion?
Mr. Chair, if I might reflect what I think I've heard from our discussion, it seemed like there were two key, one being screening and maybe conditions around that, and the other lighting and conditions around that. I don't know if anyone else has heard additional items that we want to carry forward for consideration as conditions.
So,
Ms.
Mr.
Lambert,
Chair,
please.
the only thing we had discussed is about the barriers inside of the parking lot, but I think if we can do the landscaping in that green space, we probably don't need to have that on the inside. That's the other thing we discussed. So.
Jan, could you repeat what you said? I kind of lost you there.
I know, I was gonna say, I sounded funny, I apologize. But we talked about in the actual parking lot, the big parking lot, those circles that we don't know if it's gonna be cement or rock or grass. And I was one of them that suggested that perhaps we could put some screening there. But I don't know if we necessarily need that at this time. I guess that would be something we could have a discussion. Can you hear me?
I think we got most of that. Thank you, Jan. Other commission members, anybody else want to chip in? And I think we're developing a consensus here. We're talking about doing screening of the parking lot as we begin to go down the hill, screening of the new parking lot. We're talking about trying to get the lights at 3K versus 4K. Is there a third point we want to include? Well, I've got nothing right now.
Again, it's me, Lambert again.
Yes.
Like I said, I don't. I'm just not very good. Again, I don't think we need that landscaping unless somebody can tell me that that would help block that parking lot. Like I said, I'm not very visual on that. But if we think that is the case, I would like to see that as a possible addition. Did you hear me?
I think we got it. You're talking about an additional area of landscaping, of landscaping, correct?
On the big parking lot.
Mr. Chair, I believe what Commissioner Lambert's discussing is the landscape islands.
Yes.
There was discussion of what would be in the islands.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Please, Ms. Woodward. Ms. Woodward, I think I missed most of that there. I don't think I'm alone. I don't know if we can try that one more time. I missed most of that.
Teresa, you might want to try, if you turn your camera off, sometimes that helps with the audio.
Go ahead, Ms. Woodward.
All right. Continue with the parking lot and the area that increases car and open so that to the end.
Ms. Lambert, any thoughts about that?
I agree. I think it's good. So, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
No. Okay. I am willing to do a motion unless somebody else would prefer. Maybe somebody else would prefer. You can't hear me very well.
I'm hearing you right now. So,
Okay,
Jan, if you
Okay.
wish to go ahead with the motion, I think we're all listening.
okay. I would like to approve the CUP with the condition that landscaping is done on the northern green space on Quince and Fifth. And that a strong recommendation that we get the 3,000 Kevlar on the lights. And that's my motion. And
All right.
with the finding of facts.
Very good. Do we have a second for the motion? Looking for a second, then we can start discussion.
Second, Mr. Chair, Duval.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Duval. Discussion on the motion as it stands.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
just as a question here, a potential kind of point of order or process question here, is there a possibility? I'm a little unclear on the time sensitivity of this CUP. Is there a possibility that we could see a drawing or a sketch with the proposed screening prior to the approval of the CUP, or make a condition to that CUP? Maybe somebody really smart here can help answer this. David?
I can try that, Mr. Chair. So what was done previously with the high school, because this was also discussion with the proposed parking lot at the high school, is what that condition said. I believe that when the council passed it, they added the condition that they passed it with just saying at that time it was work with staff to approve the landscaping based off of the direction that was given. So what the condition could be is you're approving it. You would like to see the landscaping coming back. I think that wouldn't hamper the school district from going out and finalizing their documents and getting out to bid. I believe they still want to try to get that out in December, if I'm correct, Reed. So that would help them kind of keep the process moving while still giving the planning commission that ability to come back and kind of give their final approval for the landscaping in December.
Very good. Ms. Lambert, are you open to a friendly amendment?
Yes, I am. And we wanted to come back to the planning and zoning. We want to have staff be reviewed by staff.
I would say both, but ultimately planning and zoning, yes.
Okay, well then I will say yes. Another condition would be that the planning and zoning would receive the landscaping plans.
All right, very good.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please, Mr. Duval.
Just for clarification, I would like to see that extended to the lighting. The applicant has expressed some desire to kind of do a check-in to see whether they may have to adjust their lighting places in order to be able to still get the illumination. So I think them a chance to be able to adjust their plan and come back to us would be appropriate. Thank you.
Jen, are you open to that as well?
I am. Do you want me to restate the motion?
One more time, we're getting there.
Can we do the whole thing? Yeah.
Well, yes. Yeah. One more time.
Yes.
The whole thing. We're getting there.
Okay. I would move to approve the CUP with the condition that we have a landscaping review with the planning and zoning on the northern green space up by Quince. And then the other condition would be that we would also have a lighting plan with the changes to the 3,000 presented back to the planning and zoning for review.
Very good. Do we need to get another second on that? Or
well, he has to approve it. He has to approve it second.
Mr. Duval would need to approve that amendment.
Yes, please. Mr. Duval?
So, yeah, I second the amended motion.
Very good. Very good. Any discussion on our motion as it stands? All right, I'm not hearing any. And so I think we are ready for a vote. Mr. Chansky, could you do a roll call, please?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Calroos.
Yes.
Woodward. Yeager.
Yes.
Lambert.
Yes.
Duval.
Aye.
and Gorham.
Yes. All right. The motion is passed. Very good. That leads us to, we are to 5B. This is a
Well,
discussion on,
Mr. Chair, may I ask a quick question then?
yes, please.
As the process of how this progresses, then does this still go to the council and they act on it so that they could approve it pending approval of the planning commission with the revisions, or how does that work?
I think it does. I'm going to let Mr. Chansky give the official answer.
Yep, Tim. So this will still go to the council on December 7th
Okay.
for their approval. Again, because the condition is it would be that the planning commission see that updated landscaping plan and then the lighting plan, but still lets you move forward. It's just that you wouldn't be in compliance with the CUP if you didn't bring those things back. So yes, you can still go to the council on December 7th, which would still have you and the school district on track to get out for bid in December.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for being part of the meeting. All right, we're going to move on to 5B. This is a great question Mr. Duvall has brought up. But looking at the state of commissioner terms that we have and how we tend to kind of got a little out of balance in terms of when terms come up. And I think Mike has some concerns on it. David, do you want to open this up and then we'll let Mike talk?
Yep, I absolutely can do so, Mr. Chair. So I'm just in your packet. You just had a little short memo that I put together. Commissioner Duval, he just asked that I reserve an agenda item for the Planning Commission to discuss regarding the service terms for commissioners. He can go into more into detail. Main concern is that as of now, of the 6 appointed commissioners, the 7th being the council appointee, the council liaison. So of the 6 community member appointees, 3 expire at a time. So there's currently 3 terms set to expire at the end of 2021. That's Commissioners Duval, Foley, and Woodward. And then a further 3 at the end of 2022. That's Commissioners Cowdery, Gorham, and Yeager. His concern, and he can go into more, I'll let him go into more effect, is because of such turnover, the question is, could that potentially cause disruptive continuity in the Planning Commission? I will say that of the 5 out of the 6 appointed commissioners, excluding the liaison, have changed since 2018. I believe, Mr. Chair, you are the only commissioner other than Councilmember Lambert who is still on the commission from 2018. So that is just one example. But with that, I will turn this over to Commissioner Duval for further discussion.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, and David, thank you for that summary. It gets at the heart of the issue, and as I look at it, I don't know that any of us would not be welcomed to continue on in an additional term. What's at risk here, by the way we're currently structured, is that half of your commission can turn over at a particular time when those terms end, and when you think about the kinds of things we're working on presently with an ordinance revision, with a future land use mapping, how that may disrupt continuity on discussions that have been had, and then at the end of the year, you come in January, now you have basically half of your board is new, and you've got to be able to basically reasonably indoctrinate them on where you're at in these various things. And it's just notable that we don't have these broken up, say, into 3 different term expirations, two in any given year versus 3, given that there is 3-year appointment. So my thinking was that, it might make sense for us to make an adjustment by maybe shortening a couple of terms or extending, either way you could look at it, so that you arrive at two commission positions expiring in any given year. So now you basically have 2/3 of your commission conceivably is still present, and you're bringing a third up to speed on the issues and giving them that opportunity maybe to also change the direction. You can certainly, under the current organization of how these are expiring, you can have pretty abrupt changes, and that may be desirable on the direction of a council. So I mean, currently structured, you could make some quick changes in direction if a commission is not acting in a way that, say, the council is comfortable with. They have the deciding approach. So it works both ways. I look at it right now as it may be a potential liability for us that these are turning over half of your board at any one time. So that's the question I put out for discussion, and whether folks feel the same way and whether action makes sense or it's fine as it is. Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Please, Jan, go ahead.
I guess I'm going to ask yourself and David, because I kind of lived through it too, but what are your feelings on it? I mean, you guys, you being the longest one here, and David, you being our boss, I feel that there was some disconnect. A lot of, the learning curve, people caught it fast. But how did you feel the transition was with what we had previously? And so, Don, you'll probably be the best one to answer that, because being the chair.
I'll just say that, Jan, I want to thank you for your role of stabilizing the group. When I first joined, it was very chaotic. The group was having a tough time getting a quorum, frankly. There was a lot of turnover when I first started. And the presence of a strong, this is my chance to say nice things about you, Jan, and say you were a strong force in keeping us together. I learned so much just about the motion process and how a group should work from you, and learned so much about the language. So I think the presence of the city council person goes far, especially with somebody like Jan that has her roots in the planning commission originally, right? And somebody that had been around it. So that was very helpful right there. I think maybe things were a little wild and woolly when we first went through all that turnover, but that wasn't so bad either. There were a lot of ideas that were thrown out there, and it was kind of interesting. I think, I guess my question that I would have, it would be can we do this? I looked through our bylaws. I can't see how we could do it. Then the question becomes, is this something for the charter? Is this written? Does somebody have a chance to look at the city charter? Does it address this? David?
Well, I'd also refer to this also to Commissioner Yeager. He's also on the Charter Commission.
Yes.
I did do a little bit of research. The question is, no, the Planning Commission couldn't change this. This would have to be something by, I believe, the City Council. Looking at the charter and the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission isn't one of those commissions that's like explicitly, this is how you'll be run. And so in there, it talks about, there's a section of the charter that refers to all the different committees and how, requirements for them, like to serve. I don't believe there's any language, Commissioner Yeager, correct me if I'm wrong, any language specifically about the Planning Commission and when their terms exist. So I'm pretty sure this would be something that the City Council as an ordinance could change. I would have to do a little more research in that. But again, I in my cursory review of the charter in this manner, did not see anything that specifically said, it will be 3 at a time. So that would be my answer. I'd have to do a little more research, but I believe it would just be a council change through ordinance.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Let's go Yeager, and then let's go Lambert.
Yeah, real quickly, well said, Mr. Chansky. I read through the charter specifically on this as well. What the charter does not account for is, the unpredictability of when members come on. And it does specifically term or give terms as far as date counts and those types of things, but it doesn't account for when people come or when they start. So this did raise a point for me that I do intend to bring up at the next Charter Commission, because I also could see how if all the timing actually worked out, you could hypothetically have an entire commission being wiped out in one fell swoop, hypothetically, if all of them were sequenced just the same. So great point here. I believe everything that David said was 100% accurate and probably something for the city to look at, but I intend to raise the question at the next charter meeting as well. Thank you.
Ms. Lambert.
Yes, I would look at our bylaws also, that we do have the bylaw for our commission. It's been a while since I looked at that, probably since January, but that could also help with our terms.
Yeah,
Mr. Duvall?
yeah, thank you. The bylaws are silent on the interval. The term is expressed in the bylaws that it's a 3-year term, but it doesn't speak to, so how should those turn over and are they adaptable? Do you just put them for 3 years whenever you get a warm body, or do they fill the remaining part of that term?
I think I can answer the question. I think what happens is that when somebody leaves, somebody gets appointed and they get appointed for 3 years. I don't think I've seen it where somebody gets appointed to finish a term, unlike the city council where you finish terms.
See that Mr. Chair, that is what I was going to ask. And we had passed that for the Fairport Commission, you can only serve 2 terms, but our question was about if you had a partial term. So maybe that would correct a lot of it, because we never had this much turnover before. But if the person that is appointed is just to finish the term that they're being appointed because of, that should keep us back in sync. I don't remember having so much turnover at one time.
Mr. Chair.
David, please.
So actually the members, there is actually set terms, and members are appointed to fill terms just like on council. For example, Commissioner Yeager was appointed. He was appointed in May of 2020, but is, I believe, 21. But it's only still, so his term will actually be about just over 2.5 years, because that term that he filled was one of the terms that was one of the seats that was vacated. I think one of them was Commissioner Marone. So one of those seats, there was 2 seats vacated at the end of 2019. And so that seat ran from 2020, 2021, and 2022. So his, no matter when he was appointed, he would expire in 2022. Same thing with Commissioner Duvall, Commissioner Foley, and Commissioner Woodward. I think Commissioner Duvall was appointed to an expiring term. Commissioner Foley and Commissioner Woodward were terms that had just begun when they were appointed in 2019, but they were vacant seats. So they are set for a specific amount of time, and then if someone falls off, they're appointed to finish that term.
Very good. Perhaps what we can do, I'll just put this out there, is we could, use Mr. Yeager here to bring this up to the Charter Commission, saying that we really do think there needs to be some clarification. Is there a consensus that we should put the question forward? Or should we go to the City Council? That would be your other alternative, I suppose.
Mr. Chair, I'm so sorry. And I think it would go more to the City Council versus the Charter, unless somebody can give me an argument why it should go to Charter.
Anybody want to take a crack at that? I'm open either way.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may, real quick, I could say, yeah, I think it's a point of conversation for the charter, but I think ultimately the determining body would be the city council. I will also add that the charter explicitly says very clearly that no one can be forced to complete any term of any office body. So hypothetically, if anyone who wants to quit can quit at any given time and no one can stop them.
Good. All right. And so then maybe our consensus is perhaps that we ask the city council to bring up and have a discussion.
I agree, Don.
Okay. Mr. Chansky, can you facilitate this?
Yep, I can put that forward, and this is just for discussion that I don't think this needs
No.
a motion to do so.
Nope. Perfect.
Yeah, so I thank everybody for entertaining the discussion. I think that's the logical next step is to say, is this of interest or concern to the council? And then they'll tell us what to do next, or they'll tell the charter what to do next, or whomever. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thanks for bringing up the point. We are up to item number 6. We're going to open a public forum here at 7:14 approximately there. Would there be anybody on the line that would like to bring up a point that's not on the agenda? Pretty confident we have nobody on the line besides us. So I'm going to close the public hearing again at 7:14. And at that point, we're going to move on to item number 7, which would be old business. And we're going to look at the flu map. David, do you want to start that, or do we have Ashley with us as well?
I'll just kick it off, Mr. Chair. So in your packet, Ashley put together some updated future land use map drafts based off of our discussion last month. So there's a few less documents this time. We have the copies of the overall future land use map. There's a future land use map with expansion areas. Per the commission's request, there's a map that grays out the city and just has the expansion areas. And then there are classification definitions, and then also an expansion area descriptions as well. And with that, I'll just hand it over to Ashley.
Thank you, David. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Commission. It's good to see you all again. I think before we jump into our flu tasks, I think that's a fun phrase, Mr. Chair, future land use work. I do want to provide a brief overview about what we went through last meeting, and I think this will be really helpful for Matt because you weren't there. So we worked through the 11 growth areas, and I highlighted each of them on a map. We discussed each in great detail. We didn't do a whole lot of changes. I would consider the parcel swaps that we made rather minimal. There was one large significant change that you all discussed in great detail, and that was the Oak Street corridor. It was a small neighborhood node at the beginning of our conversation, and it ended to be the entire length of the corridor. So the future land use map does reflect those changes. One change that I made after reflecting a long time about what does the downtown district language mean, I assigned every parcel within the downtown district to be downtown. So there's no more islands or, unique parcels that are commercial or a public. All of those uses are captured under that district language anyways. So you'll see it's all that mauve color. And if you don't think that makes sense, I want you all to yell and let me know, and we will make that change on the map. So our assignments tonight is I expect great collaboration and communication, same rule as last time. And we're primarily going to focus on the urban growth boundary outside of Brainerd city limits. So before we kick off that conversation, I do want to open it up for questions to see if the maps that you have in front of you align with the discussion that happened at the last meeting and if there's any changes.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Lambert, please.
I would Ashley, would you explain more about the downtown? You didn't, are you saying you didn't expand it at all? You just kept it in the 4-block area?
Okay, good question, Jan. So what I ended up doing was the district, you all had a relatively short conversation about what the downtown district boundary looked like. And it encompassed larger than the 4 or 5 block core. So on the west side, there was a few like loner parcels. There were some public future land use and commercial future land use. But if you think about it, the downtown district is going to encompass those uses anyways. So for the purpose of just cleaning it up and making it clearer, I just got rid of those, Jan, and just housed it under the downtown district.
And
Did I answer your question?
You did. You
And
did. So it looks like. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, Mr. Lambert, as a just also clarification to what Ashley said. You know, when we were discussing this, one of the things that I encouraged the commission to do, and you all agreed, was a lot of that discussion. We were talking about that core area of the downtown. And again, looking at the future land use map, again, we're a little higher. You know, we're at maybe that 10,000 foot view. That we're really looking at the whole area. And then once we get into the zoning, once we get to the zoning, we're going to dive deeper. And yes, the 4-block area might be different than, what the area on Laurel between 2nd and 4th looks like, or areas south of Maple look like. But from, again, a higher up view, we're looking at kind of that whole corridor was kind of agreed on is, the downtown or central part of the city, like that central district.
Thanks, that cleared it up. Thanks.
Are there any others?
I have a question. We had an interesting discussion, and I think Ms. Haskamp chipped in on this too, talking about perhaps expanding the green space along the river. And that was kind of talked about as an idea. Do you remember that discussion? We kind of talked about that. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I have lots of thoughts on that, Don. One thing I'm constantly reminded that Jennifer taught us at the last meeting is the importance of being aware of what a regulatory taking is. So limiting a property owner's ability to develop one's own property and ensuring that they're given the right to develop even at the lowest density threshold allowed. That doesn't mean, though, Don, that the Mississippi River Partnership Plan isn't still in play. So that is a tool when the community is looking to expand riverfront related recreation, open space and conservation work. That is a tool in which you reach to. But a city is limited on park expansion, if you will, with the future land use map. That doesn't mean that you can't be a purchaser of a key property along the river. We just can't limit a property owner.
Good. I just want to kind of follow up on that discussion.
Yep. And Mr. Chair, too, just what Ashley and I discussed this a little bit prior to this meeting last week. One of the things that's still in play as well is our shoreland ordinance, which is our current ordinance is essentially the adopted DNR 2002 ordinance. And that regulates what can be put on the river and how close to the river and runoff and all those things. And that's something that in reality, the city can't come in and suddenly just decide, no, what, we're going to repeal that ordinance. That's kind of, we're stuck with that in a way for now, based off of DNR rules and state regulations. So even though the future land use map, it does allow for other uses, commercial or residential uses along the river, not just restricting it to open space, we have other tools such as the shoreland ordinance that do also act as to preserve the shoreline.
Very good. Other questions before we have Ashley move forward?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Duvall.
I think I'd spoken at the last meeting about sort of adding way to our Oak Street and and Highway 25 area, in that eastern part of the city, and then also thinking about that, the south business highway 371, and whether we'd want to, at the very least, carrying it up in this view, carrying it up to where the residential kicks in, and whether we want to have that sort of a designation where we have future performance standards that govern how stuff looks as you're coming in from the south and from the east.
Are you thinking more of a streetscape type thing, or architectural, or?
It would be the gateway district as it's defined and as it's applied on Highway 210 from the west and from the north, from the east on the north side. There at the Mill Avenue area intersection. You know,
Okay.
these are important entry points to the city as well, either coming from Mille Lacs up into Brainerd and skirting up Mill Avenue and up the County Road 3, or you're coming up from the south into the South 6th and in that part of coming into the city.
Okay.
And these were to apply, as I'm reading the descriptions or the criteria, it's really to try and shape a future commercial development. So, you know, I'm still feeling like that's an
change for me.
I still feel like that's an important thing to reflect in our future map here as places we want to go.
Ashley?
Commissioner Duval, that's an easy change for me to make. And I can present those changes to you all in December.
Thank you, Ashley.
Very good. All right.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Oh, we have one more question. Yes, please.
I just Mike has identified 2 gateways. Is there any other areas that you consider gateway? Would you consider County 22 over by Walgreens as a gateway?
Commissioner Lambert, so that actually still is considered a gateway. So this darker blue here is considered the gateway district. So pretty much all along 210, we have it listed as kind of that gateway. So we already have some there. So pretty much running from where Casey's all the way through is considered mostly gateway there.
I'm saying on 22, the old Riverside, or by Walgreens. Coming down from the north, yeah. I mean, is that something we would consider a gateway coming into town from that way? The Merrifield and everything, that's the cut through for that? Or are we going to just wait and you're just kind of saying it's not necessary?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I just want to pull up here. I'm going to pull up the definition we have for gateway. I get where you're going with this, Commissioner Lambert. My concern is that we don't want to make every entrance a gateway because, again, what we're trying to do. And where's did we have gateway in here, Ashley? Gateway.
Yeah,
no, commercial. Again, this is the idea of it. The gateway being, we talked about higher quality design elements for commercial and residential construction. Along main thoroughfares in the community, or auto-oriented commercial development, low to medium density. These are types that could happen in there. And when you look at going back here to Riverside, what we have in here, I'm not sure. Personally, this is just my personal and professional opinion, whether this would necessarily really serve what we're trying to accomplish with a gateway district compared to our 210 corridor or to Commissioner Duval's point. The very south side of South 6th and the very far east side of Oak Street.
Okay, well, but it's one of the major routes coming down from the north. If you think about it, either 3 or Rivers. And this is a future land use. I understand that. but I think that's something we probably should think of.
I think it comes down to, Commissioner Lambert, again, is what kind of uses do you want to see there? I get where you're going with Gateway. I think part of the Gateway discussion is architecture and facade and how it looks, and that'll fall into the zoning code when we get to that part with Swanson Haskamp team. Right now, we do have that listed as, I believe that's mostly low, medium density and some mixed commercial residential in here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other element, is also thinking, well, what kind of development we want to see here? And I don't know if we want to see the same kind of development that we have in 210 on Riverside Drive. But that's just my personal or professional opinion.
I guess I equate it more to Oak Street, but that's fine. That's fine. We don't have to talk about that anymore. We can move on. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I like where this thought is going about ensuring that our gateway districts, and I think we're using that term a little differently, but those main corridors that lead folks into our community are dressed up. They have, they welcome pedestrian and bicyclists. They have high design standards. I wonder if we could just simply write some language in the new chapter, your updated chapter, around design standards for Business District 371, as well as the Highway 25 corridor on the east side. So in essence, they are gateway districts, but for the sake of the future land use map, we're just calling out the east thoroughfare and the south thoroughfare they need to be of higher design quality and streetscape aesthetics. What do you all feel about that?
I personally would agree with that, and I think we have to look at priorities. The priority, obviously, is the east-west corridor is the priority. That's the one that is in need of the most help. And so I think you are going in the right direction. Other thoughts?
And I agree with the design standards for that. It would make it unique to that area, to that gateway, because you're not going to have the same thing on 210 as you might have on 371 or on Oak Street. So I think it would be design standards to the gateway area.
And Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, David.
I did actually have the opportunity to have a discussion with Jennifer Haskamp yesterday afternoon. We were able to touch base, and one of the things that she shared with me that she has had discussions between herself and Mike Lamb is one of the things, as they were able to sit and participate in our meeting last month, that they just want to ensure is that when the commission and the city is looking at not just the map itself and the districts, but also as we look at the classifications and what we're looking for in there, is that we're being balancing being specific enough to ensure that we're getting what we want in those districts, or I should say keeping out what we don't want in those districts, but also being flexible enough that, especially once we get into the zoning code, we're not excluding things that we do want. So we want to make sure that we are balancing those two things out. And that's where I think what Ashley's point right now would be maybe is the right way to go, is going more towards the language and the comp plan of what we're looking for, putting some emphasis there while not putting an actual gateway district in the future land use map, where maybe what we're looking for is not, we're looking for higher architectural standards, not necessarily the uses that are found in a gateway, if that makes sense.
Very good. Are we ready to move forward with Ashley's presentation? I'm thinking we are. Ashley, go ahead.
Okay, so our task at hand is to discuss the parcels outside of city limits. So we'll be discussing the urban growth area. And David, I think the map that would be, yes, that's the map that I was thinking of. And I just want to preface this really briefly. So the majority of these future land use categories, or the colors on the map, is a direct reflection of the 2004 comprehensive plan, except for one change. there was a large swath of green space. And in reflecting on what Jennifer taught us at the last meeting, you have the ability to purchase land for future park needs, but we cannot limit a landowner's ability to develop his or her property. So there's a section that I omitted as green space and replaced with development reserve classification.
I think I'm good with that. Any other thoughts?
I printed and I don't have the legend anymore. Is the gray the future? Oh, the future things. Okay.
So this grayed out area, Commissioner Lambert, this is the rest. This is the city limits.
Mm-hmm.
And what was discussed at last commission meeting was for the discussion of outside growth is
Mhm.
essentially gray out the city. So it kind of accentuates the outside growth. So that's what
Yeah, right. Okay.
Let's start on the south side, David, so we can remind ourselves of the legend. So I will also remind you, I had a conversation with my colleagues who are the zoning administration team for Crow Wing Township. They too are going through a future land use map update. The township is looking, of course, to do very low density residential, which would be on the north side of the township. And they're going to target commercial development along 371. I don't think anyone could say that that's a big shock. But the challenge would be, let's do what we can to try to overlap and make sure that we have the same vision.
That's a fair thought.
The square enclosed within city, just as a detail, that's pretty well already platted out. As it probably is, I guess as it currently stands, it's probably mixed commercial. It's got like a logging operation on a very large parcel and then individual homes on half of those platted lots there. So just acknowledging it for what it is, maybe it's just medium to high density, low to medium density housing, just so that matches what's there on the ground for future.
So are you talking about that little square in the middle of that gray?
Yeah.
What?
This is the Fireball Drive area.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
So there's some residences kind of mixed in here. This bigger open space here, this is actually Thompson Construction.
Okay.
I'm sorry, David, what did you say that little square was?
Part here,
Yeah.
Thompson Construction.
Oh, that is? Okay.
So we don't need to limit on that. That's just a point of saying, call it what it is at this point in time for future land use. Thank you.
I would think that the best future land use for that is to be part of Brainerd, but that's my 2 cents worth. And I do understand people who live in the area think otherwise, but I think that's Brainerd.
Well, I agree in that Mr. Chair, I apologize. But that's, it's nice to have this because you can see how our border, especially when north, how we're in and out. And so, yes, it would be nice to make it all gray in there. Yeah, not have something, a little country within another country.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't hurt the tax base either. All right, so are we okay with taking the Fireball and calling that mixed residential, something to that effect?
Whatever makes sense for what's on the ground there.
What are your thoughts, Ashley?
I think it may calc out as low to medium density. Mike, I think we'll just do a calculation to see what is current day land use. I may challenge you to think about, in a perfect setting, let's say the city had the ability to welcome a developer to town and redevelop that. It looks like 40 acres. What would you envision it being?
I would sure call it mixed residential. I'd love to see a mix of high density and low density as we're pushing in other neighborhoods. That's part of our comprehensive plan. So I'd like to see it reflect the comprehensive plan and the diversity we'd like to see.
Mr. Chair, I just pulled up just to remind the commission what within city limits, what's being proposed to being around that. You've got commercial on the east side, and then I believe it's the low to medium density on the north.
Very good.
That would be a great buffer adjacent to commercial.
Very good. So we have a consensus of mixed residential. We'll kind of stick with that label on there. Am I right?
David, maybe drive us east a little bit. So on the far right side of your screen, those 2 40-acre tracts, the school district actually owns those. So I'm not familiar, I'm not aware if there's any future growth plans for ISD 181. You all might be able to provide a little bit more insight there. But as a reminder, you most certainly can develop it as, I don't know, the development preserve. It's a public use, so you would still be able to develop it as a school because it would be likely allowed in an R1 district.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Lambert.
that's the farm, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay.
So maybe to Ashley's question, if the school district says, you know what, we don't envision ourselves ever going back to teaching agricultural sciences at the post or the secondary level, would we want that to be something else? And right now it's lowly developed. We just put it in that development reserve for now and call it good. Or do we think we want to steer it towards something at this point in the plan? I'm comfortable with it being development reserve. I don't know if others have thoughts like that.
I'll back you up on that. Any other thoughts? Any other commission members? Any thoughts on the farm segment?
I would just add that I think development reserve as well. I think, yeah, I've never been out there, but I'm going to trust you guys.
Okay. All right. I think we're good on that, Ashley.
Is there any more discussion about this southeast quadrant?
Actually, I will just point something out really quick, Ashley. Again, something I apologize I hadn't noticed before. This area right here, this is a combination of steel and heating and a few other commercial / light industrial uses here. So I think this all south of Wright Street, this is the fairgrounds, so definitely public use. But north of Wright Street here should probably be adjusted.
I agree.
That sounds good to me.
And I would say I would give it to the commission. Which would you rather have that? How would you have that listed? My recommendation would either be as industrial or commercial, depending on how the commission would, should any of those uses ever go away in the city annex, how would you like that to be used? The areas up in here right now within the city limits are currently zoned industrial.
I personally would be comfortable with industrial.
So the Kitty Hawk isn't that what is Kitty Hawk? Is that trailer park, or am I in the wrong spot?
Nope, Kitty Hawk is, there's some like a storage facility and some few other things up in this area right in here.
Right.
This is the right extension of the industrial park right down here.
So I think one of the maps that's showing that is basically low to medium density residential, and that's why I was trying to reconcile what I'm looking at there.
So maybe on the inside of the city map, yep, you are correct that this should
Yeah.
potentially change.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
on that area, which, is it Kitty Hawk that has the building on it? That we had the plastic company, the plastic, business that went out there? Do you remember, isn't there a business out in that, back in that area somewhere? I thought we did have, that's why we had to extend. Okay. I thought
There are businesses out there. I can't tell you what they are.
but there's a business out there.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we okay with designating that as industrial? Do we have a consensus there? Any other suggestions other than that? I'm hearing none, so I'm going to take it as a consensus. Yes, go ahead, please.
Mr. Chair, so I think what we were talking about is the north half of above Wright Street of the future growth area, correct? Regarding the industrial.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarification. I'm good with it.
There we go. Actually, I think we're good on that point.
Yeah, this is a good place to stop. Any discussion on the east side?
How much of that segment is actually buildable land and how much of that is actually wetland would be my first question.
I wish I knew that answer, Don. Most certainly can dig into it for your December meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, this area in here is pretty wet. Obviously out here, there's commercial uses already. But then you go down here, there are some obviously residences down here, some buildable area in here. It's kind of a mixed bag.
Can we go with a term like development reserve? I know that's kind of an empty phrase, but that might be the best clarification. And also, have we had any discussion with Oaklawn Township over that?
Mr. Chair, there hasn't been a lot of discussion about any type of annexation or anything for quite a few years.
Right. Things are not a little frosty, if I remember that correctly.
Mhm.
Got it. So I think we need to maybe be a little careful in terms of what we decide they're going to do with their township.
Mhm.
And if I may, Mr. Chair,
Please.
I don't think leaving this as development reserve is necessarily a bad thing, especially when you look at what are the guiding principles in the comprehensive plan that was adopted last October. And that's really is to focus on those infill and redevelopment areas. And so while, yes, it's important for us to be looking at, okay, we need to also keep an eye out on the outside. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to say, you know what, we want to keep an eye out here. We're not sure what it is. We probably aren't going to be focusing on it in the near term. So I think leaving it as a development reserve would not be a hampering. And again, it's one of those things that if you're going to be if the city's going to be looking at annexation in the future and doing some developments, the city can always go through the process to update this section to what it foresees that area coming to do, being developed as during the process or prior to annexation.
All right, good. So do we have a consensus of development reserve for that area? Anybody, any contrary voices? Otherwise, do we have a consensus? I'm hearing none. Ashley, I think we're good with that.
Okay, I think this is a good place to stop, David.
Ooh, pick me on this one.
Mr. Duvall, do you have some thoughts?
For the Eagle View Drive, which is west of the airport, north of the Pine Shores, I'm trying. We have one house on that peninsula and that goofy little shape of the city going up there that's in the limits. On pretty much the end of that point along the river, and it sits by itself out there, and there's a fair amount of density to the north that it seems like for reasons of water quality, benefits to the river, it might be good to get that area into some public sewer service. And so why would we look away from that other than it's a lower priority than the infill? Why would we look away from that? I'm a little curious about other people's thoughts on that particular area.
I'm going to start with Jan and ask Jan, can you help us in the history? How did we end up with that?
This here, there's that one.
Yes.
Request for annexation, and they were able to connect because it went over the water. So that was how that happened. And that was the only one that was annexed. And at that time, very cautious about annexation. But what Mike had said, and that kind of the issue I have for quite a while, is a lot of that stuff should really have public say. Water and sewer, that and what's along the river. But the has not been proactive or had the desire to do that because of annexation and things like that. So, yeah, that's about all it is.
Mr. Chair, just to be clear, that's an interesting parcel by itself sitting out there alone. I was really speaking to the point that comes up on the left of the graphic there. There's just one house on that peninsula. Then there's water as you move on that south line. It crosses and divides an island, and then it comes down to the paper mill area and such there. And that's the part. So if you were there you go. Thank you, David. All that stuff to the north there. Why would we? That's already platted. Now you've gone too far north. So basically, west of the airport and north of that last in-city lot, we have one house there, and then all that subdivided land there, with little inland wetland lakes, river frontage with houses and so forth, and then stuff that's on Rice Lake that just speaks that there'd be water quality benefits. It may not require an annexation effort, maybe there's, because it would probably cost quite a bit to push infrastructure out there, but maybe there's some sort of a sanitary sewer service agreement with the township to address those benefits out there that would accrue by maybe moving some of those off of septic onto something that captures and treats.
So, Mr. Duvall, I would step into the question for Mr. Duvall. Mike, what would be your ideal future land use designation for those parcels?
Well, it would be what it is in that case. Some of that is you got some 40s there that are undeveloped, but they're going to be limited also though by the airport overlay there on what you can do in that flight path and such. So it may be developed as far as it's going to go. I'm thinking about it more from If you would pick up the Pine Shores area that shows there on the south side of the airport, why would you not, which is also fairly well platted out as future growth, why would you not think about that area there on the east bank of the river that's already platted out as well?
And Mike, you're talking about the gray spot in there, correct? Right off that's the house we're talking about, correct?
Yeah, that
Down.
area there. There's just a house is in the city limits there. And I don't know how that came about either. Again, maybe an annexation request, but what services are we providing?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
What would, Mike again? Oh, Mr. David, please.
You know, Mr. Chair, obviously I haven't been around as long as the rest of you have. But from having discussions with, for example, the city engineer, and I think one of the issues about one of the reasons I think there's been hesitation about expanding the infrastructure, specifically water and sewer, out to those areas. A lot of it comes from, I think, the Riverside Drive experience, and I think part of it is just how the city has approached it historically. And when Riverside Drive went in, that was, I think it was somewhere in the $10 million mark to put in the water and sewer there. And what we've seen is, obviously we go down here, is they put it in, and the city said, connect if you like, but if you connect, you must annex. A lot of people said, you know what, I think I'm good, which left the city with quite a bill. And so I think part of that has been there's that sour taste, I think, as well as, if we're going to be doing this in the future, there has to be a different approach. It can't necessarily be this voluntary connect if you like, but also looking at does our current system, can it support such an expansion? Is there desire for such an expansion? Just due to the pure cost of what an expansion would cost. I think that's part of the reason why it hasn't expanded, especially along the shores of Rice Lake into the Mississippi, is because of, the people out there aren't calling for it. And so unless the city's going to come in and do some forced annexation and force people to pay those assessments, then it's more of a losing endeavor for the city than anything else.
Yeah. Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
I'm going to expand on the Riverside project. Mike and I, we walked that to get the petition to move on for that, to move forward on that project. The mistake that the city made is the fact that they did do a volunteer. In the past, if you wanted city water and sewer, you had to annex. But like David said, they allowed it for volunteering. That is something I think the city should not do again. But really, a majority of the people there wanted to have city water and sewer. But then with the option of not being connected, they opt not to. Same with Wonderland Park, too. We walked Wonderland Park, and most of that's now connected with the city water and sewer. So.
Very good. I'm gonna bring it back to, again, the question of our future land use map, the flow map. What do you think is going to be the best designation to? I think we've kind of laid out what we like to see. What's going to be the best designation
for that little spot there that we're talking about, that little horn? I think perhaps with that, I think it would be best to be residential. Well, I think mixed residential would be probably pretty good, because I bet a lot of those houses could be used for Airbnbs if they're not already.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Do we have a consensus to mixed residential for that segment that we're talking about there? Any other opinions? Not hearing any. Actually, I think we're good with mixed residential.
You could think of it maybe as mixed mixed commercial residential with the proximity to the airport and such as well. Or the flip side. What's the flip side? Was the neighborhood? What was it? Neighborhood mix or something like that. But that neighborhood mix wouldn't fit there, or maybe it needs to be a little bit of both. Maybe as those parcels get close to the airport, you might put more of a commercial emphasis on them, and those along the river be residential, that whatever they calculate out to be.
Well, yeah, and the shoreline management is going to limit what a lot can go on there, right? Because you can't build it. You can't do anything.
All right, I think, are we getting close to a consensus? Teresa, did you wish to speak? Are you there?
Hi, Mir. I agree with what Jan said about a mixed use. I'm not exactly sure what designation to give that, but with the proximity to the airport and the water, I'm confident that there's good restrictions on what can happen along the waterway, but I believe that would be a good place for development to allow Airbnbs and things like that to go in.
All right. Actually, are we being specific enough? Are we giving you something to work with here?
Yes, sir.
Actually, go ahead when you're ready.
All right. David, that looks like a good spot. Okay, so for those following along, we're on the north side of town, north boundary.
Orientate, what's the black line? Is that a boundary or is that the?
Right here?
Jan, good question. That's township.
Yeah, between the two yellows. Is that the boundary for the township? Right?
And it's the Paul Bunyan Trail, I believe.
2 yellows. Oh, yes, that is the right of way of the Paul Bunyan Trail. Thank you, Mike.
Is that parcel between Riverside Drive and County Road 3 buildable? It's just not declared in there, or that's something we would just leave behind? It strikes me that would be a commercial kind of a lot, parcel as well, if it's developable, and I suspect there might be enough of it developable to do something there.
I think with your road right away, that one's going to be tough, but with all the setbacks. But yeah, possibly, huh? David?
Yeah, I think we're both taking ownership on it.
Let me see who owns this, first of all. That'll be helpful. Okay, so it is privately owned.
Mm-hmm.
It's potentially buildable, maybe up in this area here. As to what that would be is a good question, but in theory.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Jan, please. Go ahead.
That property at one time, a house was supposed to be built on it, and that was in the late 80s, early 90s. It did not fall through at all, so I think it is. Like I said, it's for a house, and it was really placed weird on that lot, so they had the foundation.
All right, I think Jan has finished. Any more details we wish to discuss here? I think we're getting a little granular. It might help if we try to kind of get a little bigger view of what we want to do with larger sections. kind of losing you there. David, are you with us here? What's going to be the most constructive thing to look at the basic segment on the north segment there? What's going to be the most constructive thing for us to do here?
So I guess, Mr. Chair, I'm trying to understand what you're asking, what to do with this whole block, or
well, all I'm saying is I think our discussion is getting down to very little individual segments right now, and we need to kind of back up and look in.
I'll just say, looking at kind of again, do we agree with this or not? I think that's kind of the simple discussion here. You know, this area, and here's especially when we're starting talking about this McKay Peninsula here, pretty built out. I think what Ash's got here is low to medium density off of Riverside again, and then as long as along those small areas that kind of pocket it here with some reserve out here on the where Wise Road starts to come in around in this area. I'm not super familiar with this. I know there is development in here as well. Not sure exactly how developed it is up in here. I know it is obviously platted, you can see, but I think again, development reserve for that area would be appropriate.
I am good with that designation. Is there a consensus on that, or any other thoughts?
I agree.
All right.
I'm sorry, did you guys say mixed use? I'm sorry, mixed residential? I'm sorry, I had a full one.
Development reserve.
Development reserve? Okay. I know that, again, I think mixed residential will be good too for Airbnbs up in there, but that's good.
I just want to point out that low medium residential doesn't mean no Airbnb. Just remember, low to medium residential is not R1. So
no, it's a good general way to look at that land.
Yep.
Very good. Ashley, what do you have next for us?
Well, we're finished with our discussion about urban growth boundaries. I have a bunch of notes, and I'll make the changes to this map to be included in your draft chapter for your December meeting. I just want to provide a few of the next steps. So December, you'll receive a draft land use chapter. Excuse me. David and myself, and likely Jennifer, will be discussing how do we want to integrate the workforce housing study that was done by Crown County into your comprehensive plan. So you might have some revisions there, more to come. Just be a little flexible there with us. We're also going to make some additions to the implementation chapter because, believe it or not, this was one of your action steps. So kudos to you all. You are making great progress. In December, we'll discuss your comments. And if there's significant comments, I will stand by not making a recommendation. We'll wait to do that until January. But in theory, January 1 of 2021, we will start floating the draft out to our county partners, our surrounding local units of government, gathering feedback and comments with the possibility of a public hearing at your March Planning Commission meeting. And then we will go from there. So in March, you'll make a recommendation to approve or deny, and then it will go to council for adoption.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you may.
Ashley and David, what do you anticipate for community feedback in this? Maybe drawing upon your history or just your knowledge of how these things go? What are we looking at for community feedback here?
Does this get to the part where you can quit at any time?
David,
No,
I'll take the first stab.
No quitting.
You know, that was a great question, and I appreciate you thinking about community engagement. So I just want to float out there, you know, we're in a pandemic. So I think ensuring that people are aware that there's an opportunity where their voices will be heard is the most important thing, Kevin. Do I think a lot of people are going to come to your meeting, assuming it may be virtual in February, March? Probably not. But showing that you're making an effort, that is what matters. I don't think anyone is going to throw anything at you. I think it will be rather painless and a welcoming conversation, but my hope is you do get some feedback.
Well, it's riveting material, so I think we can expect some definite feedback. So that's where I was going with this.
Mr. Chair, and
Yes, please.
I do think the fact that we're going to communicate with the adjacent townships and that is a very big plus. And I think that's where we're probably going to get most of our feedback from. But I do applaud the fact that we are going to the surrounding community, because I don't believe that's really happened before. So.
Good. I think that's that's a positive way for the city to move forward. I think we have concluded this segment. Ashley, thank you so much for your hard work on this.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, you may.
There was actually one part, I hate to keep us on the subject.
But wait, there's more?
But one thing that after further review, one thing I realized that I think I wanted the commission to discuss was this parcel here. This is the Brainerd Industrial property, the old paper mill.
Oh, yeah.
And the question that I wanted just to float out there is, it's been historically, for almost 100 years, over 100 years, an industrial use. The question I have is take away who owns it, take away what it's being used for now. Do we want this to be an industrial use in perpetuity? Across from a park, next to our neighbors, next to a neighborhood, right next to a cemetery. Is this something that we want to be? Is it the city's intention to have that be an industrial site no matter what? Someone comes in and says, say that we demo everything that's there. Do we want them to be able to come back in and build a brand new industrial center right there on the river?
No.
Neighborhood? Or is there an intention of saying, 20, 30, 40, 10 years down the line, we'd like this to be eventually be something else?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Lambert.
I said that's a great question. And I would say I would rather see that in more of probably a mix, either mixed residential, mixed commercial, but not the industrial. And I think it would enhance that in the town a lot. And also, we would need to look at our river, like your committee that you're on, Don, for that, and maybe another point of a stopping point for that.
I'll speak to that by saying that the largest neighborhood in our town is Northeast. The neighborhood that has really the toughest time to get real access to the river outside of Rice Lake is Northeast. That would be a great future way of connecting a neighborhood to a river, which was the initial point of the Riverfront Committee. So I think that's a great point.
That site has over 100 years worth of history about it. It's not quite as charismatic as the railroad area, the Northern Pacific Center. The buildings don't have quite the appeal. The city, through BPU, owns the dam with the history there, which is the blue part of that. So I don't know if there's some historic preservation elements to that site to think about, whether it's more to the points of interpretive centers and the history of Brainerd that gets you into the public, semi-public institution kind of a land use category, where you might have something like that, perhaps at the dam and north up to the bridge, that location. And then you think about a different use on the downstream side of the dam that might look like the mixed residential, mixed commercial residential, or something like that. So I could imagine that part from the dam going north being something that's more educational or civic in feel.
Mr. Chair, I do have another question. What, how they're with the warehouses and everything down in the cities, they're reinventing it, making lofts and things like that. is that something that, you know, if the buildings could be left or usable, what would that be? What kind of a designation would we put on, or, you know, for that? Because if the buildings are good and if somebody's willing to redevelop in something like that, that would be a good thing too.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Jan, that's a great question, and I can speak a little bit, somewhat intelligently about this, as I've been a contributor to projects, lots of projects in the North Loop and in the Minneapolis area. And what I can tell you is that COVID has absolutely 100% changed a big part of those types of developments. And what I would say is that the areas that we tend to see that type of expansion or that type of development do really well are the areas that are very close to or have close proximity to cultural elements such as theater, music, food, those types of activities going on in very close proximity. So great question, but I feel like this is just going to be a little bit too detached on that side for turning those types of buildings into that type of residence. But who knows? I'm in agreement with the group that I'd love to not see this be industrial, but this is obviously a big jump and a very forward thinking to not see it that way. So,
however, you might imagine that the building's not suitable, but the concept of sort of warehouse kinds of design structures. So we could start from bare ground and put something up that looks and feels like an old mill and connects maybe, but it's maybe loft residential kinds of living and builds off of that. So when under the hood of whatever the zoning does there, you could almost think about it like design standards there. We'd love to see something that tries to pick up the history of the site in some fashion in the design.
For the purpose of this discussion, would we be okay with a mixed residential? I mean, that'd be kind of radical right there to look at an industrial property and call it mixed residential moving forward. I like it. Would that be a label we're comfortable, or are there other ideas?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
It's a big area. What would we do with mixed residential, but maybe have it like your little commercial entities in there? What kind of designation would we put there? And that's what I can see. It's big enough we can have the mixed residential, probably multiple. So would we?
Like Kingwood?
Well, I hate to say this, but I was thinking more of a modern theme on it. More modern, more of to show that, just kind of a more modern type look. And maybe where you have your coffee shops and perhaps you have your artsy or music, or even have a space for outdoor amphitheaters. That's what I can see up there too.
Neighborhood mix, right?
More? Okay.
Yep, neighborhood mix, because I don't think either of us have a crystal ball that's good enough to look out there and really see what's going to happen. But I think we can send a signal with that term, saying that we'd like to see something different and better that fits better with the town. Does that make sense?
Love it, and thanks for the question, David.
All right. Are we ready to move past blue? I'm assuming
where are we heading?
We are heading down. We're item 8. Commissioner questions and comments, unless anybody else has anything else to discuss on the map.
Were we going to talk about the land use classifications at all, or that been updated? If I could just shoot one quick comment about that, for the mixed commercial residential, I still don't know what to make of light in general, and if you might be able to put those into terms that kind of think I know where you want to go with that, but something that maybe echoes what we're talking about in the commercial uses in some of the other categories, so that, you know, I'm assuming light in general means the coffee shops, maybe means a small convenience store or something like that, but if you could just help me with that particular terminology, maybe try and make it reflect other parts so that it connects better. I'm just still struggling with that.
Commissioner Duval, I agree with you. You know, so if you were to look at neighborhood mix, I think we did a better job writing that statement. I don't feel like, can we just take another stab at the type language? And I think if we rewrite it, it'll align better with what you envision.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just want to say thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Duval, because I think that points directly at what I was discussing with Jennifer Haskamp yesterday, of just making sure we're being specific enough, you know, like the neighborhood mix, office, limited commercial, professional services, daily trips. I think that's broad enough to get what we want, but also limited enough to avoid target.
Makes some sense. All right. I'll take one more crack at this. Are we ready to move on to item 8? Or are there any other questions? Oh, I declare it number 8. We are commissioner question and comments time. The floor is open. Mr. Duval?
You could tell my finger was on the button, wasn't it? Huh? I'm going to ring in, man. David, it was very difficult now with the COVID stuff and the challenges of working from home and trying to manage a group like us. I'm wondering though whether we could be thinking about training opportunities to make this group smarter or more effective, and that's putting a lot on you, but it's also difficult probably to bring people to us other than electronically. But I'm feeling like you could benefit from continuing to develop your board here. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and Commissioner Duval, definitely will be looking into those things. I think now that as we're entering, you know, I think we're entering month 9 of COVID. You know, one thing I've been seeing out there in the world is people are starting to adapt more. I think one thing we were just talking, I can't remember who was talking about it at work or somewhere about this. I think some people still have this idea that, you know, we're going to turn the page in 2020 and COVID's going to go away. I don't think January 1 is suddenly going to make COVID disappear. So what I am seeing is, yes, people are getting much more used to doing things virtually and it's becoming much more accepted. What I also am seeing at the same time is a lot of people haven't yet put out what their trainings and things for 2021 are going to look like, because I think they're holding out a little bit, hoping that restrictions are going to loosen and we'll be able to do some things more in person. But I absolutely will keep an eye out for some opportunities and see what would be of good use for the commission. If any of you ever have any ideas of specific topics that you think would be helpful in discussion, especially I think during this time that we're going to be doing a zoning code update, I can either be talking to the Swanson Haskamp team if that's something that they would be willing to do, and it might be a little addition to the contract, but we can look at that, or just be looking out for others who might be able to speak on those topics as well.
Very good. Any other points?
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
I
please.
want to take this opportunity to thank you all. I've enjoyed working with you all, and I probably will forget to say that in December. So I just want to say thank you for all your learning experience on what I've learned. So I appreciate working with everybody. So keep the good work up, guys. I'll be watching you with my grandbabies.
Jan, I'm going to step in. This is like I hinted at earlier. I was looking for an opportunity to say nice things about your work here, and you've done so much. one of the reasons that I've had the courage to be the chair of this committee, I think it was 2 years ago, is that you pulled me aside and you told me I could do it. And I really appreciate that. You had confidence in me, and that meant everything to me. And like I said earlier, you've been a real stabilizing force on this group, which I really appreciate. You've provided continuity that's been so important, and helping to explain how our city's got into so many odd little places. And you've done so well. So thank you for your service. It's sincere. I really appreciate it. You're on mute.
Well, yeah, I've been talking too much today anyway, guys. Thank you. I do appreciate it. And thank you once again. But
Very good.
thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Anybody else want to embarrass Jan? All right. I think we're done with that. I think we can move on to number 9, Development Director's report. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few things. First, as I've mentioned a couple times this meeting, I did have the opportunity talk with Jennifer Haskamp as well as Allison Yanner, who's if you might remember from their proposal, she's the project manager. She's the one who's kind of in the background, making sure everything's progressing as it needs to be. Yesterday, we talked for about 90 minutes. We should be seeing some things are continuing to be progressing. I sent them a ton of documents earlier today. Should probably be hearing from them again in either December or possibly January. Again, the next thing we'll be looking from them is going to be that vision memo that they are working on. One of the things we are going to be, she and I have begun to have the discussion about, is potentially taking a look at the project timeline. And because of COVID, because of we're kind of going back into a kind of a work from home world and away from being able to be together, is looking at that timeline and figuring out, can we shuffle some things? Can we take some things that were maybe in phase 2 or 3 and kind of move them up, maybe move back some of that public engagement until we can actually have a better grasp of what that can look like and what we're going to be allowed to do. Some things that, Ashley mentioned it and she and I discussed it yesterday, Jennifer and I, is that public engagement is very, very hard to do virtually. Especially if you're actually trying to get people beyond a survey, you're trying to get them to actually talk to you. It's very difficult to do virtually. So maybe pushing some of that off and just kind of re-looking at the timeline and figuring out what are the things that are phase 3 that it will not hamper the process to move up. So we'll be looking at that over the next couple coming weeks as well. You'll probably hear about more of that in December. On that note, we will be having our December meeting, which will be on December 16th. I know in the past, the December meeting's kind of been a as-needed meeting, but as we're trying to continue pushing forward with the future land use map, I think we definitely will be having that meeting on December 16th. Depending on if we get any land use applications, I could see that meeting really kind of just being future land use map and potentially a shorter meeting. The last thing I have is that on November 2nd, the city council discussed for themselves, they were looking at the order of meetings, and they did vote to adopt an order of updating their order of meetings. And I'm going to share a document with you really quick. And as part of what they did is they motioned that they wanted all committees and commissions to operate off of this same order of business. Obviously, it's going to be a little different for the planning commission than it is for council. Obviously, you don't really have a consent calendar, but you'll be seeing starting in December, much of our agenda does follow this, but a few things are going to be changing. A pledge of allegiance, the council doesn't do that while we're virtual, so we won't be doing that. But I'll be adding that while we're in person. Before the approval of the agenda. We don't really have a consent calendar, but this is the area where the approval of the minutes would go. Presentations, if we're having anyone coming present, would be next. Followed by, right now, the council, the planning commission doesn't have any subcommittees. Sometimes they have, though. It's been historical that sometimes there have been subcommittees. That's when those would report. The main switch is going to be the switching of unfinished business and new business. In the past, we've done new business first, got that out of the way, and then done unfinished business. However, how the council has opted to order things is to do unfinished business first and then new business. This is something that I think the planning commission, depending on what's on the agenda, at the time of approval of the agenda, if you want to move things around, you can do that. For example, if we're going to have the future land use map and we're going to have a discussion that's going to be 2 hours long, hey, let's shift this around to allow some of the quick things to happen first in case there's anyone around who wants to discuss those, get out of the way. But when I do publish the agenda, it will be in this format. Then the public forum will be last. Right now we have public forum in between unfinished business and new business, followed by staff reports and commission reports, and then adjournment. So I just wanted to let the commission know that when you see the agenda in December, it will look a tad bit different. And I just wanted to let you know why that will be. Other than that, Mr. Chair, that's all I have.
I just got to wonder why the city council thinks it's important to change our agenda. I'm just really confused, like, as if our agenda's been broken anywhere along the line. And the Pledge of Allegiance, I just see that as kind of fake patriotism in my own book. And I'm probably not going to be doing a whole lot of pledging on that one. But anyhow, the decision's been made. That's our agenda. We'll make the best of it. We'll be fine. Unless anybody else has any other questions or comments, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Lambert's move.
Do we have a second?
Jaeger second.
Thank you,
Yay!
John. Yeah. All in favor? Oh, no, roll call.
Calrus,
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
Jaeger,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Duval,
Aye.
and Gorham.
Yes.
Later.
We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Can I talk to you for just a minute, David? I'm sorry, David, can I just speak to you real quick?
Yep. Let me make sure that we get the recording finished
Okay.
first. Up there we go. And then Sean can take us off of